Hello, welcome everyone to the MuseScore Café for today, June 17th, I want to say, 17th, 2020. My name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and this is my regular series of chats, the MuseScore Café, where I pick some topic relating to making music with MuseScore, and we just talk about it for a while. So I'm going to do my usual sound check here. Yeah, I seem good. Okay. The topic for today is the MuseScore 3.5 beta, which we just put out a few days ago. And we had put out an alpha a few weeks ago, meaning like a very first preliminary version of what's going to be 3.5. Beta is now pretty close to what we actually expect MuseScore 3.5 to be. And there's still, there'll be some bug fixes. We've already, found a few bugs that need fixing, and maybe a couple other small improvements will sneak in. But the 3.5 alpha contained a number of fairly big improvements already, and 3.5 beta has some more. So hello, everyone. Hi, Colleen and Marcus. I want to start off by talking about what's new in the beta. So if you already saw the one on the alpha, it's not that I'm not going to talk about those things at all, because I do want to at least show some of them and talk about one of them in particular, the chord symbol playback, because we're looking for some feedback. But I want to start off by focusing on some of the things that, if you've already been playing with the alpha, here are some of the things that are new in the beta, and then I'll go and talk about what was new in the alpha. So there's actually a lot of mostly fairly small but significant things. I mean, a lot of bug fixes, but bug fixes aren't fun to show. So I made myself a list, and I'm going to find it in a second so that I can be looking at my list. Okay. So one of the changes that I actually want to talk about some is right now it was in MuseScore, in previous versions of MuseScore, the default was always when you open MuseScore, you would see your score full size, meaning at 100%. It would be exactly the same size on screen that it would be printed. Now, if you had some funny problems going on with your monitor and MuseScore couldn't figure out the resolution, might be off, but under normal circumstances, it would be the same size as the piece of paper, which is great if your monitor happens to be just a little larger than a piece of paper. If, on the other hand, so I'm going to actually go and show you what that looks like on my screen. On my screen, this is what 100% looks like. I am using this on what's about a 12-inch screen at the moment, and that's, I don't know exactly how wide this area where I have where my score is visible, but I would say that this is probably only about 6 inches wide. If it's 12-inch diagonal, that means it's probably only 9 inches wide, and a couple inches are taken up by the inspector and the palettes here. So under normal circumstances, 100% chops off part of my score. Now, I often would close the inspector, F8. Oops, I hit FN, F8. F8 closes the inspector, and now suddenly it fits. Well, that's all well and good, but often I want the inspector, and then, boy, part of my screen is shut off. So I've been in the habit of switching to the page width view, which just compresses the view to fit within whatever's visible. And this works pretty well, and I've used it for a long time, but this is now actually the default. But we're not sure we're going to leave it as the default, so we're looking for feedback on that. It works pretty well if your screen is close to the width of a piece of paper. But if you've got a really small screen, if you're working on a netbook or a small Chromebook or some other computer with a 10-inch screen, or if you're not used to working with the window maximized like this, you're using the window smaller like this, then it's pretty small. Or if you've got a really big monitor, a 21-inch monitor, suddenly your score is going to be enormous. So not everyone is going to want the page width. Now, you can change what the default is. So just because that's the default when you first start MuseScore doesn't mean you're stuck with it. All you have to do is go to Edit, Preferences, and here under Canvas, you'll see where you can choose whether you want the default to be page width, or you can pick percentage 100%. So that's what you can do to control this. But the page width works pretty well for people with, say 13 to 15-inch monitors. On my 12-inch monitor here, it's a little small, but if I close the inspector, it's okay. But it's usable. So anyhow, we'll be looking for feedback. So anyone watching live, feel free to give your feedback in the comments about this, or if you're watching this later, feel free. Well, I mean, you can if you're watching live, you can do it in the chat. If you're checking it out later, you can go to the comments or go to the forum on MuseScore.org and let us know what you think. So anyhow, so just changing the default wasn't. That isn't necessarily a big deal in itself. What's really actually cool about it is if you go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, there are now, and then I search for zoom, you'll see the ability to define shortcuts now to zoom to page width or the previous magnification level. So what it's going to do is toggle between page width and 100 or whatever else. So so I see you prefer 100, Marcus. I'd like to know what size monitor you have, just out of curiosity about that. So if I define my own shortcut here, I've been using on my other computer Control/. And now except I think I also have Control/ defined on this computer to do something with my broadcast software, so I don't want to mess that up. So I'm going to try just Control backtick. I already used that for Zoom Canvas, which just lets me zoom, choose a zoom. How about just backtick all by itself, just so we can see that. So I've made backtick. So now backtick will now switch me back and forth. I guess I have to switch to something else first. 100. Backtick will switch me to page width and then back to 100. So I now have an easy way of flipping back and forth. Okay, yeah, but Marcus, what about the actual physical size of your monitor? Like if it's much smaller than 12 or much bigger than 15, we expect people are going to prefer 100. We're really curious if people have like between 13 and 15-inch monitors, if they're still preferring 100. At least that's what I'm the most curious about. So anyhow, this lets you flip between those. So those additional zoom preferences are good. The other thing that's new, I have to actually make sure I have my customized. My zoom in shortcut doesn't always work on this keyboard just because of where the plus sign is on this particular keyboard. So I like to define a new shortcut for zoom in to be Control equals and add that. All right. So the other thing that's new is as I zoom out and zoom back in, the sizes are a little more manageable. The size, it used to jump by too big of a margin when you did that, and so I'll also here under Edit, Preferences, Canvas, you'll see that there's like what that precision is. I can change this to be 6. That's high precision, I guess. And when I do that, also the preference window got a lot faster. That's one of Sergio's improvements. It used to be for the last year or two that saving preferences was really slow, but now it's quite quick. Okay, so now if I start zooming out, it's zooming out in smaller increments. And they're designed to be similar to if I use the mouse wheel, but when I use the mouse wheel, it actually can go through a lot more things. So anyhow, I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to work. But in any case, those are some of the new things regarding zooming. It's not, a huge thing, but it's something that we're looking for a little more feedback on, and people are going to notice right away that page width is the default. But you can change that default, as I said. So if you prefer 100, just set it that way. You don't have to worry about it. But we're curious about it. Okay, so those are some of the zoom changes. I want to talk about a couple other changes that are kind of interesting. One is something that I implemented myself. There was a long discussion a really interesting, every once in a while we have people who come from either Finale or Sibelius who are really used to working in a particular way and then are surprised or put off that MuseScore doesn't do things exactly the same way. And we do our own things and they're quite efficient. But if you're used to doing it one way and you've developed an efficient way of working that way, sometimes you're looking for ways of reproducing the things you did before rather than learning a new way. And I can understand that. And to the extent it makes sense, we want to be able to support these things. And one of the ones that came up is we've long supported a command R. So I'm going to enter an eighth note D here. And if I press R, it just repeats that note. If I enter a whole chord, R repeats that chord. We've always had that command. Well, I don't know about always, but for many years we've had that command. If I select a range of notes, like these 4 eighth notes, and press R, I can copy that entire range. What didn't work before is just clicking a single note and pressing R. It didn't work before, now it does. So if you're in note input mode, then R has always repeated that chord. But people were wanting, or even just a single note, let me enter a single note. People were wanting to just be able to click a single note and press R to repeat that note. Why do they want that? Well, it's because some people are used to a note input method in which they don't actually use note input mode. Instead, they just repeat the previous note and then use the arrow keys to change it. So letting R work on a single click was one of the things that it sounds like a minor thing, and to most of us it is, but to people who are used to working that way in Sibelius, it was an unbelievably passionate arguments from people explaining why this was so important to them. So this is there now. Now, while this discussion was happening, a few other things came up. Right now, I can click a measure and select that whole measure. But people are like, what if I want to select that measure plus one note? I want to select that measure and then only this G over here. That didn't used to be possible. If you had a range selection, which is what we call this thing with the blue box, there was no way to then select one additional note to put in it. Well, check this out. I'll show you. The way you can normally build selections of things that are not connected is control clicking them one at a time. But if you really literally wanted this whole measure plus one note, there was no way to do it. Well, now there is. Select that whole measure, control click the note, and now you have a range selection that has everything in that measure. I mean, it's not a range selection anymore. The box is gone. It got converted to what we call a list selection, meaning just the notes themselves are what's selected. But what's important is the notes are selected that you want to be selected, so if you start hitting the down arrow, it moves what you want to move down. So you can do that to have, as I said, a selection that maybe is a measure plus a note. But what about if you wanted like everything in this measure except this A? I can control click that note and it's excluded from the selection. And now as I hit the down arrow, everything changes except that note. So that was another thing that came up from that same discussion. I don't personally know that I'm going to use either of those features, but it was easy enough to implement them. I'll tell you what I will use though. Check this one out. What if I add some lyrics here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I'm typing very poorly here, obviously. Let me just fix that one because it bugs me. And fix this one because it's going to bug me. What if I just want to select 1 through 6? There was a way to do it before. Well, first of all, you can control click each of these things one at a time. Oops, I missed the 4. Okay, so that was a thing. But also, there was a way where if you selected the range, so select a note and then, oops, come on. My keyboard detached a little bit. Okay. Select the range, click a note, shift click a note. I could select a range and then right click a lyric and say select all similar elements in range selection, and that would select the lyrics in that range. Well, notice how I selected the range. Just click a note shift click another note. That's an easy way of creating a range selection. If you didn't know it, there you go. You learned something else new. But that's the way range selections are. That's like in a word processor. Typically, you can put the cursor in one place and then shift click somewhere else, and it selects everything between them. That's a fairly common thing. Well, the one place it didn't work was in MuseScore was, well, any place other than notes. Well, now it does. Click 1, shift click 6, boom. There's that. I also have it set where it'll only it'll limit it by voice too. So if one set of lyrics in one voice and another set in another voice, it'll only do in those lyrics. The same thing is going to hold for everything else. So let me select all these things here, and I'm going to press Shift S to apply staccato dots. Actually, let me undo that. I'm going to use Shift V to apply accent marks since they're a little easier to see. What if I want to just select these 4 accent marks on the chord and get rid of them? Well, click one, shift click the other. And now I can delete those 4 all together. So that's something I implemented a few weeks ago, and I am really happy that I did, because I've been using that thing a ton ever since we put this beta out. I think people have long expected that to work and post on the forums, how come that doesn't work? And I'm like, I don't know, we just never implemented it. And one day I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. It was the same day I decided to do these other things. I just decided I was going to fix this too. So there's something else that's new in the beta. There's a couple other things that I want to talk about that are related. So one other thing here is if I enter a bunch of notes, and then I enter some chord symbols. Remember that they play back now. I'm going to come back to that. That's part of alpha, but obviously part of beta too. All right, so I got my chord symbols here. So I can also do the same thing, click one, shift click another to select them all, right? But it used to be the case, and I think still will be by default in this score anyhow, if I move a note up, it pushes, it avoids the collision, but it leaves the rest of your notes, the rest of your chord symbols not aligned. Well, some people at least want the chord symbols to be aligned. Sometimes I don't. If I have one chord symbol that's just going to be way out of alignment and the rest of them really can be in their default place, I'm happy to leave that the way it is. Just let that one note, that one chord symbol be way out of alignment. But if it's just a little bit out like this does look a little funny. Well, we now have a way to solve this, and we'll probably end up having it by default in at least the jazz templates. But for now, it's not going to be by default because it's going to change. It would change how older scores would look. But if I go to Format, Style, and then Chord Symbols, you'll see maximum shift above, maximum shift below. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set maximum shift above to 2. 2 is a pretty good value. And you can see what it did here. Now all these chord symbols are aligned. Let me move this note back down. So notice the chord symbols start aligned. There's a bug where now they're actually all a little too high. We've already got that bug fixed. So it won't be that way in the release. But notice as this note goes up, it's not just pushing that one F higher, it's pushing everything on that line higher. And it's going to keep doing that, but I gave a maximum shift of 2. As soon as I get to a point where that F is way out of alignment, then it lets it be way out of alignment. So that way you can say, align all my chords unless it's going to look stupid. Because realistically, if you have one chord symbol that's got to be way high, you don't want all your chord symbols way high as a result. You probably just want that one to be an outlier. So a value over like 2 to maybe 3 is probably a good value in there. And then the same thing is true in that same place, Format, Style, Chord Symbols. You see that there's a maximum shift below, and I'll set that to 3. And I've been using this, I've been developing all these music theory handouts, and so if I put in some Roman numeral analysis here, add text, Roman numeral analysis. Remember, that was new at about, I forget, probably 3.3, I think. 1, 4, 1, 4, 1. And then one of these notes gets low. Same thing. It's going to push the Roman numerals all so that they stay in alignment until I pass that threshold that I set, and then it lets the 1 be off. So anyhow, I've been using this a ton and really enjoying it in the educational handouts I've been putting together lately. So there's another new feature, and then the last new feature that I know I want to talk about that's new for the beta is another one that's been a pretty common request, and let me show you how this works by entering notes into another voice. So we've long had a feature, in fact, let me delete this note. Okay. I keep forgetting. I use two different keyboards and they have backspace and delete in different places, and I keep forgetting that when I go back and forth, I hit the wrong button. We have always, or for a long time, at least since MuseScore 3, maybe since MuseScore 2, I don't even remember. I think maybe since 3. What do I know? We've automatically displaced the rest. All right, the chord arrest here normally is centered on the staff, but as soon as you go to multiple voices, we displace the rests so that they kind of avoid the things in the other voices. But we used to only, like, that chord arrest would always be right there. And if this note here, this G, got higher, then it would collide with the rest. Well, not anymore. As I move, I'm going to use Shift Alt up. That moves diatonically, so it doesn't go through all the accidentals. Notice now it's pushing that rest up. So that was a bit of collision avoidance that really we should have, people would have expected us to do. I might have expected us to do for MuseScore 3. We just never did. Now we do. So that is there. And then the same thing is true going the other direction. I have a G here, and you can see as I move it up and down, it pushes that rest down. Let's see. Any flip staff? Oh yeah, absolutely. The X command has always, ever since MuseScore 3, so for the last year and a half, X. Oh, X. The X command currently isn't doing the right thing when you're using the alignment feature. I think that's also fixed as part of the same fix that I mentioned that had to do with why these chords were too far above. So let me just go in and just put in another chord symbol on a line that doesn't have alignment factored in. So I click the C, I press X, it flips it above and below. The same with the Roman numeral analysis. If I click that and press X, and again, the alignment feature is currently messing that up, but that is fixed, so not to worry about that. If I come to Format, Style, and I just reset both of these settings here, then the X will flip the Roman numeral just fine, and it will flip the chord symbol just fine. So X flips just about everything now in MuseScore. So X on this lyric here, having trouble selecting it. 1 X X X. On the articulation X. It works for dynamics, right? If I enter a dynamic on this guy, X, X, X. So X flips most things, not just stem direction. Actually, I wonder if the toolbar button, there's a toolbar button, right, to flip things. Oh, except oh yeah, here it is. Oh, look at that. The flip toolbar button, even though it's a picture of notes, actually flips anything too. So there you go. So X flips things. Yeah, that's been around for a while. This idea that the rests now avoid notes, that's new with the beta. There's another thing that's new with the beta, which the best way for me to show that is to enter some notes. Okay, so let's say you've got a situation where you have just 2 eighth notes and then some rests, and then in voice 2, you also have, say, this. So it's long been the case that we automatically offset these rests so you can see the independent voices. And in many contexts, this is what you want. You want to see the separate voices for the separate voices. In many contexts, that's what you want. In some situations, though, you don't want that. In some situations, you want the rests to merge where they can. So here, because both voices have exactly the same rest, we want them to merge. So we've long allowed you to just press V to make one of them invisible. By making it invisible, it'll merge the other ones. And that works, but that's manual. You had to work a little bit to make that happen. Well, if I right-click this staff and go to Staff Part Properties, there is now Merge Matching Rests. When I click this guy, hit OK, boom, the rests merge automatically. The reason it's a staff property is because the perception is that this is something that vocal music is most likely to do. In piano music, you might do it sometimes, but you probably don't do it always, because in piano music, if you're trying to indicate polyphonic textures and things, and even in vocal music, if you really have polyphonic textures, you don't want to merge every single rest just because you can. In fact, I don't know, is this going to merge all the rest if I put in a note here? Yeah, so like this would not really be considered. Well, sometimes it's considered okay, sometimes it's not. Here, that there's different rhythms between the two voices. Right, one voice has a half note here, one voice has quarter notes here. Some situations, it's then okay to merge their quarter rests. Other situations, it's not. So if you want to control it measure by measure, you can continue to press V. But if you know what, I'm basically writing a chorale, a hymn, something in which most of the voices all have the same rhythm, and therefore they're all going to have matching rests, and I just want to merge them all. Even when like one voice might move a little bit, that's okay. I still want to merge all the matching rests. Maybe you want to do that in just the vocal staves, but you don't want to do it if it's like an opera. Say you don't want to do it in instrumental parts. You don't want to do it in organ parts or piano parts. Well, then that's why it's a staff property. So you, again, right-click, Staff Properties, Merge Matching Rests. And I think before the final release, we'll probably make the SATB template do that automatically. So as far as things that are new in the beta compared to the alpha, those are the main ones. I'm probably forgetting something. And if anyone who's already been playing with the beta or any of the developers are paying attention here and say, oh, you forgot my favorite thing, which is the whatever, let me know. But I do want to revisit a couple of things from the alpha and talk about some things that we're a little curious about. At least I'm a little curious about some of them. One of them is the chord symbol playback. If I play this score right now, starting here, yeah, the dynamic. Okay, great. We can hear the chords play back. And that's because this is implemented for 3.5, but not by default. You have to go to Edit, Preferences, Score. Oh, no, not Score. Note Input. It probably belongs under Score. And here's Play chord symbols right here. So this option currently defaults to off. So when it's off, you're not going to hear the chord symbols play. And we did that because if you had an existing score and maybe it was a lead sheet, maybe you already put a hidden staff with some playback on it. Or maybe it's like a big band score and you really don't want to hear MuseScore's, default playback on the chord symbols because you've already written in voicings for trombones and trumpets and saxophones and so forth. So maybe you don't want to always hear. Okay, see you, Colleen. So maybe you don't want to hear the chords all the time. So we made it default to off because people who are used to hearing their scores the way they were maybe would be surprised to suddenly hear these play back. What this means, though, is now because it's a preference like that, you might have a score and you've turned on your playback of chord symbols and you're hearing them and you're all happy, and then you send that score to someone else or you post it to MuseScore.com, and suddenly, because it defaulted to off, no one else is hearing those chord symbols. Well, this doesn't seem right to me. So we already have the ability to turn off chord symbol playback. I'm having trouble clicking today, and I don't know why, but I might have to look into that. When you click a chord symbol, notice there's the play property here in the inspector. So I can turn off the play and then press set as style. And now none of the chord symbols will play back, even if I go to preferences and turn chord symbols back on. You'll see now that my chord symbols don't play back. So if I click, yeah, and this is what's, I guess I'm just not quite on the chord symbol. I'm not sure, but something feels a little off to me there. And I'm hoping it's not related to those selection changes I made. So I click the C and I turn on play, and now just the C will play back because I only pressed I only turned on play for that one. When I hit set as style, it's going to be back for all of them. So I feel like that style setting is sufficient, really. But there's another thing that we can do, and that is if I go to the mixer, which is F10, and I expand the piano here, you'll see there is a, if I click over here, this is the harmony. I guess I need to expand my mixer a little bit so you can really read. Piano chord symbol. Well, I guess the word chord symbol is cut off a little bit, but this chord sims, period. So this channel controls that. So I can control the volume of the chord symbols, make them much more subtle. Oh boy, I could barely hear that at all. That was too subtle. How about around here? That's too little. You know, something like that, maybe. I don't know. Or I can just mute it. So what I'm thinking about is the possible idea that if you have existing scores and we're worried about people not wanting to hear the chord symbol playback on their existing scores, we could mute we could make that channel be muted by default in existing scores and have it only be not muted in new scores. That's a thought. Or we could just decide to have chord symbols play back. I'm kind of leaning towards that, just letting them play back for everyone. If you want to turn them off, you can. I think I'd rather answer that question on the forums. Have people say, hey, how come my chord symbols are playing back? How do I turn it off? I'd rather answer that than have people not know the feature even exists because they have to turn it on. I don't know. So, but the other possibility is, again, we could try to make it so older scores don't play back the chord symbols by default, and you have to do one of those two things: change the style setting or change the mixer. The mixer one's probably easier for us to implement because we're not changing the file format so that it's hard to know if it's an older score or not, but we can figure out if it had the chord symbol channel already set up in the mixer. So an additional switch. Yeah, so default for the play on an additional switch. So I'm not sure which additional switch you might mean. Oh, and I love to see chord playback in the style rather than preferences. Okay, so it is in style. So that's the point, is it is in style as well as preferences. It just seems like too much. So right now there's it's here in the inspector, and I just use the set as style button. But I think if I go to format, style, chord symbols, I guess we didn't actually put it in the style dialog. There might be a pull request pending for that to place them in here, or maybe there's not. or maybe that's something we're putting off until MuseScore 4 because a lot of this stuff is changing for MuseScore 4 anyhow. So maybe that was the deal. But anyhow, it is a style setting. You just can access it by turning it on here and then set a style. So anyhow, there's that. So anyhow, we'll definitely be interested in further feedback, but one way or another, I feel like I can't let it go out the way it is right now, because right now people might turn on their own preference for chord symbol playback, and then they upload their score, and then they create a lead sheet. It's got chord symbols, and then they upload to MuseScore.com, and then suddenly no playback on the chord symbols. So I feel like we need to deal with that so that when you share the score, everyone hears the same thing. So I'm just trying to figure out what the best solution is there. You really want 4? Okay. Yeah, it is. So preference, style, default. So there's no reason in fact, I might keep the preference, but just make it default on. And there actually is. You're also missing the other layer, which is the harmony channel in the mixer. So there already is the preference. There's the style, and maybe that's, yeah. So anyhow, there's that. There's the style. There's the property in the inspector, and then there's the preference, and there's the mixer channel. So there's lots of different ways to control that, which really just gets confusing overall. But they all serve a slightly different purpose, so I'm not suggesting we get rid of anything. Maybe get rid of the preference, or maybe just make it default to on. And then if it defaults to on, I think that'll basically solve any problem I feel needs solving. Okay, so as far as other features that were already there in the alpha, but maybe I didn't get to show or didn't get to talk about as much as I would like. One of them, there's a number of things, and there's one also that sort of has some questions in my mind. I don't know that there's any changes that I would recommend as a result, but let me create a score, and I'm going to make it for, come on, open, flute, and alto saxophone. And I'm going to make the key signature be B major. Well, B major, actually that's too much. How about E major? So E major, if you transpose for alto saxophone normally adds 3 sharps. And many saxophonists, because alto sax is always adding sharps, they're used to reading sharps. So there's many alto saxophonists I know who would be perfectly happy to see this 7 sharps, because they're used to seeing sharps. They're always seeing 3 more sharps than everyone else. They also see 3 fewer flats. They almost never see flats. The key of A flat major would turn into F major, so they would see, if there's 4 flats in the concert key, they would see 1 flat. So they never see 3 or 4 or 5 flats. It just never happens. So turning this into 5 flats would be confusing to many alto saxophonists. The exception would be the people, and this is a lot really, who don't just play alto saxophone, who also play flute, also play clarinet, also play piano. Maybe they're used to seeing, maybe they just prefer seeing 5 flats to 7 sharps. As a pianist, I would prefer 5 flats to 7 sharps. So we now have a feature, and again, it's at the staff level. So if I right click and go to staff part properties, you can say the default will do the correct thing, the technically correct thing, which is to add 3 sharps. But if I say, you know what, I prefer flats, then I can say prefer flats. And now you have flats. So that is a feature that was added in the alpha. The thing it doesn't do is change the notes. So if I've entered myself a nice little scale, and then I say, you know what, I've now decided I want to, I'm trying to right click. I want to change this to prefer flats. That is really only about the key signature. So my notes are still spelt wrong. Now, that's not a big deal. I can go in here and select these notes and press, click, shift click. I can press Control J. And I'm using Control J rather than J. So Control J respells the notes in their current mode. And what I mean by that is, notice that they're spelt now with flats, and they make sense in the key of D flat. But if I switch back to concert pitch, they're spelt now correctly for E major. So it actually makes the spelling inconsistent, right? E should have turned into C sharp, but it here turned to D flat. So Control J lets you change the spelling of notes to be, different, basically, between concert and transpose, different-er than they normally would be, if that makes sense. This should have been a C sharp, but it makes it be D flat. So that's something, and then also chord symbols won't transpose. I'm kind of thinking I might want to see if we can get chord symbols to honor that same setting, but I don't know how often that's going to come up as an issue. There is another solution, though, that I should mention that's kind of clever. I'm going to undo all that stuff I did. If I just come here and I add an instrument change here and say, well, no, I don't even need to add an instrument change. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Staff Properties, and I'm just going to change the transposition. So instead of saying major sixth, what if I call the transposition, let me get it right, augmented fifth? From E to D flat. Nope, that's going to be diminished seventh. All right, diminished seventh. Check this out. That didn't change the key signature, though. Should it have? Yes. Okay, so maybe I need both. Maybe I need both those things, but I'm a little curious about that. I would have thought, okay, I just needed to re-add the key signature, and then it changed it. So anyhow, there's a way, if you change the transposition to something that's a little goofy, that's an easy way to get that effect. Now, you don't want that throughout the score. Maybe if later on in the score there's a section where it's, say, in, well, that's not bad. It actually did fine. Anyhow, I'd have to think about that, because you probably don't want that funny transposition everywhere. But what you can do is put in an instrument change from the text palette, which is one of the other new things here. When I add an instrument change, I don't know why I'm using drag and drop. When you add an instrument change, it immediately asks what instrument you want to change to. And you can tell it, I want to change to alto saxophone. And when you do that, it'll say, okay, you are now an alto saxophone. Of course, it already was alto saxophone, but when I do that, do I need to select it? I guess I need to select it. Alto saxophone. Okay. It then resets all the transposition stuff. So anyhow, you have to think through that and play with it. But anyhow, that's just another way of getting the effect that you want. I think what happened was, I entered all sorts of goofy notes. So if I delete those notes, or let me just respell them correctly. There we go. Is that better? Better. Okay. So, just because I entered the notes while they were still in funny transposition, that they were funnily transposed. So anyhow, I could use that. So now notice it's doing the right thing. So I used an instrument change so that it's like a normal alto saxophone most places, but it's a funny transpose, a diminished seventh transposing alto saxophone in other places. So there's another way to get that same effect. So anyhow, if people have feedback on that feature, there's still room to make further improvements between now and the final release, and that's one that still feels like a little questionable to me about how that works. I really would like to see, if I enter an E chord here and I switch off concert, it did change the default. That's because I used the transposition method. All right, so the transposition method is going to, by calling it a diminished seventh, it's giving me the right transposition here. If I had used the prefer flats and key signatures option, it wouldn't have done that. whatever, we got a way that works. But if people have further feedback, by all means, I'm interested to hear it. So it would take quite a long time to go through all the alpha things again, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is return to, I'm just going to link, because I can do that, to where I did talk about the alpha, and put that here in the chat, and then you can see that if this page ever wants to load. Hello. All right. Make sure I didn't miss anything that was in here. So this is some of this stuff is talking about stuff that was already in MuseScore 3. Wow, what the heck? Something's wrong. YouTube. Come on, YouTube. Yeah, I guess I don't even really want YouTube Studio. I just want my, that's crazy. I just want to see my videos. So I want to get to the alpha one, so I can link to that, so you can just watch that. When MuseScore 3.5 comes out for real, I'll do just a quick run through of everything that's new in MuseScore 3.5, because like I said, it's really quite a lot that's new in 3.5. I mean, I just showed you the stuff that was new for wow, my system is just slower than usual even. Here's the Café for the alpha. Okay. Yeah, when MuseScore 3.5 comes out for real, I don't know, a few weeks, then I will do a brief rundown of everything that's new, or as much as I can get in, because it's a lot. But hopefully this was useful, and we would love it, love it, love it, love it. I don't show you these things just, or I don't show you them in the beta so that you can like say, oh good, I can't wait until I can use it. No, the point is you can use it. Please, we want you to install the beta. So at the top here of the chat, I have pinned the link to where you can download this thing. You can download it and still have MuseScore 3.4 installed. So if you're worried, oh, it's beta, it might crash. Yeah, it might, but it's all I'm using now, and it's really working well. And we just want people to use it and test it, because if there are crashes, we need them to be reported, or any other bugs. And so we really, really, really want people to be downloading and installing this beta and helping us test it. So please go and do that. We would appreciate it greatly. And in fact, I can probably put that link directly in here if I remember how to do that. There's some funny feature where I know, no, that's not it. Optional features, no. Anyhow, somewhere I'll figure out how to do that. I might have to do it later. Put in a link where you can just go there and click it and download it. So we really want to get feedback on this beta so that, you know, any bugs that are left get found before the release. So that's my spiel on the beta. Please help us test. Please give us feedback. Next week, I'm going to return. I've been using the alpha for ages and didn't have. Yeah, alpha was working great too. So the beta fixes a lot of the bugs that were there and adds a lot. There are a couple known bugs in the beta, but yeah, they're mostly in things that are in the new features anyhow. It's very little that actually worked before that broke. Yeah, I'm not even. Students, Isaac is going to be on, and he's the one that I'm mentoring, and he implemented some features. In fact, as far as the new MuseScore 3 features, if I press M for multi-measure rests, that's long been a thing we've supported, but you were kind of stuck with the position of it here. Well, now one of Isaac's features is that you can customize this position. Put it somewhere else, and then press set as style, and now all of them are there. Or you can even have it be, you know, all the way below if you prefer it below, and have that be the position. So this is now a customization that he's added, but for Summer of Code he's going to add other new features relating to multi-measure rests, also relating to measure repeats, and maybe we'll be seeing, won't have implemented by next week the 2-measure repeats, but that's been a big request, and hopefully that's going to be something he's going to get done this summer. But he's going to show you some more options for customization of multi-measure rests, including the ability to use the kind of old style ones that have all sorts of different symbols, not just a big bar. So that's something that you're going to be seeing. We'll talk to Isaac about that next week. And then we'll see after that. After that, I might want to come back and talk a little bit about some music theory stuff that I've been working on. So hope everyone's having a good summer so far. And I will check in with you guys next week. And thanks for tuning in. And see you later. Bye.